the exhaustion of trying to carry everything alone. There comes a point where the weight becomes too heavy to hide anymore. You wake up thinking about problems that still have no solution. You go to sleep carrying questions nobody around you can answer. Your mind keeps running endlessly, trying to fix situations, predict outcomes, avoid disappointment, and hold everything together at the same time. And the exhausting part is that even after giving everything you have emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, peace still feels distant. You have tried to stay strong. You have tried to remain patient. You have tried to figure everything out on your own. But deep inside, your heart is tired. Tired of carrying burdens nobody fully understands. Tired of pretending everything is fine while anxiety quietly grows inside your thoughts. Tired of fighting battles internally while smiling externally. And maybe that is why you are here right now. Because something inside you knows you cannot continue carrying this weight alone forever. There are people listening to this prayer tonight who feel emotionally exhausted from trying to control situations they were never meant to control. You keep thinking, what if things never change? What if the answer never comes? What if everything falls apart? And little by little, fear begins stealing your peace before tomorrow even arrives. But listen carefully to this truth before this prayer continues. God never asked you to carry your entire life by yourself. He never asked you to solve every problem alone. He never asked you to destroy your peace trying to control outcomes only He can fully see. That is why Psalm 37 speaks directly into exhausted hearts. Commit your way to the Lord, trust in Him, and He will act. Not you forcing every door open, not you carrying every burden alone, not you exhausting yourself trying to predict every future outcome. God will act. And for many people listening right now, this may be the moment where everything begins shifting internally, because the greatest exhaustion is not always physical. Sometimes it is spiritual exhaustion from trying to carry responsibilities, fears, pressure, uncertainty, and emotional pain without fully surrendering them to God. Tonight, this prayer is not just words. It is release. It is surrender. It is the moment you stop trying to hold together what only God has the strength to carry completely. So stay here. Do not leave this prayer halfway through. Because the next part speaks directly to the confusion, delays, unanswered prayers, and uncertainty that have been quietly draining your heart for far too long. When life feels uncertain and nothing makes sense. There are seasons in life where nothing unfolds the way you expected. Doors close without explanation. Prayers seem unanswered. Plans fall apart unexpectedly. And no matter how hard you try to stay hopeful, uncertainty slowly begins wearing down your heart. You keep asking God for direction, clarity, and breakthrough, yet everything around you feels delayed, confusing, or painfully silent. And the hardest part is not always the problem itself. Sometimes the hardest part is not understanding why it is happening. You wonder why certain situations refuse to change, why opportunities disappear, why relationships become complicated, why answers take so long to arrive. And while waiting, your mind starts creating fear around the unknown future standing in front of you. Because uncertainty has a way of exhausting people emotionally, it keeps the mind restless. It keeps the heart heavy. It creates overthinking that never fully stops. You begin replaying conversations, decisions, and possibilities repeatedly, hoping somehow you will finally discover clarity through constant mental effort. But instead of peace, you become more emotionally drained. And many people silently reach a point where they stop feeling emotionally strong enough to continue carrying the pressure alone. Maybe that is exactly where you are right now. You still believe in God. You still pray. You still try to remain faithful. But internally, you feel tired of waiting without understanding what God is doing. Tired of trying to stay calm while life feels unstable. Tired of pretending uncertainty is not affecting you deeply. But listen carefully to this truth. God is not confused about your future even when you are. He is not uncertain about the direction of your life. He is not overwhelmed by the problems making you anxious tonight. And even when nothing around you seems to make sense, God is still fully aware of every detail unfolding right now. That is why Psalm 37 does not say, "Understand everything first." It says, trust in him. Because trust becomes most powerful when clarity is absent. Anyone can feel peaceful when answers are visible. But real faith begins during seasons where you cannot yet see how God is working behind the scenes. Tonight, you are being invited into deeper trust. Not trust based on circumstances, not trust based on visible progress. Trust rooted in the character of God himself, the God who still works during silence, the God who still moves during delays, the God who still guides people through seasons they do not fully understand yet. And while uncertainty may be surrounding your life externally, something heavier may already be growing internally. Because anxiety has a way of quietly placing unbearable pressure on the heart when uncertainty remains unresolved for too long. The hidden weight anxiety places on your heart. Anxiety rarely arrives loudly at first. It begins quietly. A thought you cannot stop replaying. A fear about tomorrow. A burden you keep carrying mentally even when your body is exhausted. And little by little, what started as concern slowly becomes emotional heaviness that follows you everywhere. You wake up already thinking about problems. You try to distract yourself, but your mind keeps returning to the same fears. Even during moments that should feel peaceful, your thoughts continue racing internally. And the exhausting part is that anxiety does not only affect the mind, it affects the heart. It steals rest. It drains emotional strength. It creates tension inside your spirit that never fully seems to disappear. Some people listening to this prayer tonight are carrying silent pressure nobody around them fully understands. Pressure about finances, pressure about family, pressure about the future, pressure about situations completely outside their control. And because the burden stays internal most of the time, people continue expecting you to function normally while your heart quietly grows tired beneath the surface. You continue smiling, continue working, continue handling responsibilities, but internally you feel emotionally overwhelmed. That is what anxiety often does. It convinces people they must carry tomorrow's battles before tomorrow even arrives. It keeps the mind trapped in possibilities, fear, and overthinking. What if things get worse? What if I fail? What if nothing changes? What if the answer never comes? And while those questions repeat endlessly inside your mind, peace slowly begins disappearing. But tonight, God is inviting you to stop carrying mentally what He already sees completely. Because anxiety grows strongest in places where control feels impossible. And the truth is, many of the things overwhelming your heart right now were never meant to be carried by human strength alone. That is why the presence of God becomes so important during seasons like this. Because God does not bring peace by immediately explaining every detail. He brings peace by reminding you that you are not facing life alone. Tonight, this prayer is becoming a place of emotional release. A place where your restless thoughts begin slowing down. A place where fear no longer controls every conversation happening inside your mind. Lord, calm the anxiety inside my heart. Quiet the thoughts that keep stealing my peace. Help me stop carrying burdens you never asked me to carry alone. Because constant anxiety eventually creates emotional exhaustion. And emotional exhaustion often comes from one deeper problem many people never fully recognize. The exhausting need to control everything themselves instead of fully surrendering it to God. Why trying to control everything is draining your peace. One of the greatest sources of emotional exhaustion is the constant attempt to control things that were never fully placed in human hands. You try to predict outcomes before they happen. You try to prevent pain before it arrives. You mentally rehearse conversations, prepare for worst-case scenarios, and search endlessly for answers that still remain uncertain. And while you believe control will create peace, it slowly does the opposite. It drains you. Because the mind was never designed to carry the pressure of controlling every possible outcome in life. Yet many people spend years living this way without even realizing it. You tell yourself, if I think about it enough, maybe I can fix it. If I prepare for every possibility, maybe I can avoid disappointment. If I keep holding everything together myself, maybe things will not fall apart. But the more you try to control everything, the more emotionally exhausted you become. Because control creates constant tension. You cannot rest fully. You cannot breathe peacefully. You cannot experience calm internally because your mind is always working, always analyzing, always anticipating what could go wrong next. And eventually, peace disappears beneath the weight of trying to manage what only God can truly oversee completely. This is where many hearts quietly break. Not because they stopped believing in God, but because they kept carrying burdens God was asking them to surrender. Psalm 37 does not say, "Control your way." It says, "Commit your way to the Lord." That changes everything. Because committing your way to God means releasing the belief that everything depends entirely on your own strength, your own understanding, and your own ability to hold life together. It means trusting that God can see what you cannot see. He understands what you do not yet understand. He already knows how situations will unfold before your mind even begins fearing them. And tonight, God may be asking you one powerful question. What would happen if you finally stopped trying to carry everything alone? What would happen if you stopped forcing yourself to have every answer immediately? What would happen if you allowed God to hold the pressure you have been secretly carrying inside your heart? Because many people say they trust God while still emotionally carrying every burden themselves. But trust always requires release. You cannot hold tightly to control and fully surrender to God at the same time. Tonight, something deeper is beginning. Not temporary comfort, not emotional distraction. Real surrender. The kind of surrender that finally allows peace to enter the heart again. And before that peace fully arrives, you must understand what Psalm 37 truly means when it says to commit your way completely to the Lord. What it truly means to commit your way to the Lord. Many people hear the words from Psalm 37 and immediately think surrender means simply waiting passively while life unfolds on its own. But committing your way to the Lord is far deeper than passive waiting. It is an active decision of trust, a spiritual release, a moment where the heart stops trying to carry life independently and begins placing everything fully into God's hands. That kind of surrender is not easy, because human nature constantly wants certainty. It wants immediate answers, visible progress, control over outcomes. But faith often begins exactly where control ends. To commit your way to the Lord means bringing every burden, every fear, every unanswered question, and every uncertain situation before God honestly. It means saying, "Lord, I do not understand everything happening right now, but I trust that you do. I cannot see the full path ahead of me, but I believe you are guiding me. I release the pressure of trying to control what only you can truly carry." That is what real surrender looks like. Not pretending problems do not exist, not ignoring emotions, not forcing fake positivity. Real surrender is choosing to trust God while uncertainty still exists. And for many people, this becomes one of the hardest spiritual battles. Because surrender feels vulnerable. When you stop trying to control everything mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, it can initially feel uncomfortable. Your mind wants to go back to overthinking. Your fears want to regain control. Anxiety wants to convince you that if you stop carrying everything yourself, everything will collapse. But the opposite is often true. Sometimes the reason peace has been missing is because you have been carrying responsibilities God never intended for your heart to hold alone. Tonight, this prayer becomes an invitation into deeper trust. Not shallow trust based on perfect circumstances. Trust rooted in God's character. The God who remains faithful even during silence. The God who continues working during delays. The God who sees the full picture while you only see small fragments of the journey ahead. And this changes the way you approach your struggles. You stop asking, "How can I control everything?" And you begin asking, "How can I trust God more deeply through this season?" Because surrender is not weakness. It is spiritual alignment. It is recognizing that God's wisdom is greater than your understanding. His timing is greater than your urgency. His ability to carry your burdens is greater than your emotional strength alone. And once you truly begin committing your way to the Lord, something powerful starts happening inside you. The burdens you have been carrying so tightly finally begin loosening their grip on your heart. Letting go of the burdens you were never meant to carry. There are burdens many people have carried for so long that they no longer remember what emotional rest feels like. The pressure becomes normal. The worry becomes constant. The overthinking becomes part of daily life. And little by little, the heart grows tired from holding weight it was never created to sustain alone. Some people are carrying fear about the future. Others are carrying pain from unanswered prayers. Some are carrying pressure to hold their family together while silently breaking internally themselves. Others are exhausted from trying to appear strong while emotionally falling apart inside. And the dangerous part is this. When burdens remain unspoken for too long, they begin shaping the way you think, feel, sleep, pray, and live. You start waking up tired. You stop feeling emotionally present. Peace becomes harder to hold on to. Even moments that should feel calm become overshadowed by internal pressure. But tonight, God is inviting you to release what has been crushing your spirit. Not tomorrow. Not after every problem disappears. Now, because some of the weight on your heart was never meant to stay there permanently. You were never designed to carry every fear alone. Never designed to solve every situation through your own strength. Never designed to mentally hold together every uncertain outcome in your life. That is why Psalm 37 becomes so powerful during seasons of emotional exhaustion. Commit your way to the Lord, trust in Him, and He will act. Notice the invitation hidden inside those words. God is asking you to release what you have been gripping so tightly. The fear, the pressure, the anxiety, the emotional overload, the constant need to know what happens next. And for many people listening right now, that release may feel difficult at first because the mind has become attached to control through fear. You think, if I stop worrying, maybe something bad will happen. If I stop mentally carrying this, maybe everything will fall apart. But worry has never protected your future. It has only exhausted your present. Tonight, this prayer becomes a sacred moment of release. Lord, I give you the burdens I cannot carry anymore. I surrender the fears keeping me awake. I release the pressure of trying to fix everything alone. Because something beautiful happens when burdens leave your heart and enter God's hands. Breathing becomes easier. Thoughts become quieter. The soul begins resting again, not because every answer arrives immediately, but because you stop carrying the impossible weight of controlling life entirely by yourself. And once those burdens begin leaving your heart, faith slowly starts growing stronger than fear, especially during the moments where you still cannot yet see the answer unfolding in front of you. Trusting God, even before you see the answer. One of the deepest challenges of faith is trusting God during the moments where nothing visibly changes. You pray, but the answer has not arrived yet. You wait, but the situation still looks uncertain. You ask God for direction, healing, breakthrough, or peace, yet silence seems to remain in front of you day after day. And during those moments, fear begins asking dangerous questions. What if God is not listening? What if nothing changes? What if I keep waiting and still remain disappointed? That is where many hearts become exhausted, not because they stopped believing in God completely, but because waiting without visible answers can slowly wear down emotional strength. People often think faith becomes strongest after the miracle appears, but true faith becomes strongest before the answer arrives. Faith is choosing to trust God while uncertainty still exists, trusting Him while the door remains closed, trusting Him while the prayer remains unanswered, trusting Him while the path ahead still feels unclear. And that kind of trust is not easy, because human nature constantly wants proof, visible movement, immediate reassurance. But God often works differently than human expectations. Sometimes He strengthens your spirit before changing the situation. Sometimes He teaches surrender before opening the next door. Sometimes He develops trust during the waiting season itself. And tonight, God may be asking you to stop measuring His presence only by visible results. Because silence does not mean abandonment. Waiting does not mean God has forgotten you. Delays do not mean He is no longer working. Psalm 37 says, "Trust in Him and He will act." Not, "Trust only after you see results." That changes everything. because many people are waiting to feel peaceful only after circumstances improve. But God wants to place peace inside your heart before the outcome fully arrives. A peace rooted in trust, a confidence that says, even if I cannot see what God is doing yet, I believe He is still working. And for some people listening tonight, this may become the exact moment where faith begins replacing emotional panic internally. You stop demanding immediate certainty from tomorrow. You stop needing every answer right now. Instead, you begin trusting that God's timing is still unfolding even while you wait. Because God is often moving in ways human eyes cannot immediately recognize. He may already be preparing answers you cannot yet see, already opening doors behind the scenes, already protecting you from situations you do not fully understand yet. And the next part of this prayer reveals one of the most powerful truths exhausted hearts often forget during difficult seasons. God is still working even when you cannot visibly see movement yet. When God is working behind the scenes without you seeing it, one of the most difficult parts of trusting God is accepting that some of His greatest work happens invisibly at first. Human eyes naturally look for visible proof. You want to see progress. You want immediate answers. You want confirmation that something is changing. But many times God is already moving long before circumstances begin shifting outwardly. And because you cannot see everything happening spiritually, emotionally, and behind the scenes, fear tries to convince you that nothing is happening at all. But silence does not mean inactivity. Delay does not mean absence. God can be working in ways your mind cannot yet fully understand. Even now, while you are waiting, God may already be arranging situations ahead of you, protecting you from doors that would have harmed you, preparing opportunities you cannot yet see, strengthening parts of your character that will be necessary for the next season of your life, healing wounds inside you before placing new blessings into your hands. But because the process remains invisible for a while, many people lose peace during the waiting season. They assume, if I cannot see movement, God must not be doing anything. Yet throughout the Biblia Sagrada, God often worked silently before visible transformation appeared. Seeds grow beneath the ground before anyone sees the harvest. The dawn begins forming before sunlight becomes visible. And many prayers are being answered gradually, in ways people do not immediately recognize. Tonight, this prayer is inviting you to trust God beyond visible evidence. Because God sees details you cannot see. He knows conversations happening behind closed doors. He knows what needs to be removed before certain blessings arrive. He knows the timing capable of protecting you instead of harming you. And while your mind focuses on what feels delayed, God may already be preparing something far greater than you imagined. That is why fear becomes dangerous during waiting seasons. Fear only looks at what is absent. Faith remembers that God can still move invisibly. Lord, help me trust you even when I cannot see immediate change. Help me believe you are still working behind the scenes. Teach my heart to rest while you prepare what I cannot yet fully understand. Because exhausted hearts often believe they must force movement themselves whenever life feels uncertain. But not every delay is punishment. Not every closed door is rejection. Not every season of silence means abandonment. Sometimes God is protecting you from outcomes you are not ready to fully understand yet. And once you begin trusting that God is still working invisibly, another burden slowly begins leaving your heart. The constant fear about tomorrow and the future you cannot control. Releasing fear about the future into God's hands. Fear about the future can quietly take over the mind without warning. One thought becomes another. One concern grows into constant overthinking. And before you realize it, you are emotionally living inside problems that have not even happened yet. You wonder what tomorrow will bring. You fear situations you cannot predict. You think about financial pressure, unanswered prayers, relationships, family struggles, health concerns, and uncertain outcomes that still remain beyond your control. And the exhausting part is this. The future keeps moving forward whether you feel emotionally prepared or not. That is why so many people secretly live in constant internal tension. They try to mentally prepare for every possible outcome because fear convinces them preparation will create safety. But fear never truly creates peace. It only creates emotional exhaustion. because no human being was designed to carry tomorrow before it arrives. And yet many people listening tonight are doing exactly that. You are carrying future conversations before they happen, future disappointments before they exist, future problems before they appear, and your heart has become tired from holding invisible burdens that belong in God's hands instead. Tonight, this prayer becomes a moment of release, not because every future question suddenly disappears, but because you begin surrendering tomorrow to the one who already stands within it. Psalm 37 reminds exhausted hearts, commit your way to the Lord, trust in Him, and He will act. That includes the future you cannot fully see yet. God is already present in the days making you anxious tonight. He already knows what next month looks like. He already understands the situations that currently feel uncertain to you. Nothing about your future surprises Him. And when this truth settles deeply inside your spirit, fear slowly begins losing its power. Because fear constantly asks, what if everything goes wrong? But faith asks, what if God is already preparing the way ahead of me? That shift changes everything emotionally. You stop believing your safety depends entirely on your own ability to predict and control life. Instead, you begin trusting that God can guide you step by step through every unknown season waiting ahead. Lord, I release my fear about tomorrow. I surrender the future into your hands. Help me trust you with the things I cannot control or fully understand yet. Because many of the fears consuming your thoughts tonight may never unfold the way your anxiety imagines, and even if difficult seasons come, God's presence will still remain greater than the uncertainty surrounding them. You do not need complete visibility to walk forward in faith. You only need trust in the God who already sees the full path ahead of you completely. And the next part of this prayer speaks directly to that journey, learning how to follow God's direction even when you cannot fully see where the path is leading yet. Allowing God to direct the path you cannot fully see. One of the hardest things for the human heart is walking forward without knowing exactly where the road leads. People naturally want certainty before taking the next step. You want clarity before trusting. You want guarantees before surrendering. You want to see the entire path before moving forward. But faith rarely works that way. Many times God only reveals enough light for the next step. And for people who struggle with uncertainty, that can feel deeply uncomfortable. Because your mind wants complete understanding. You want to know how everything will unfold, how long the waiting will last, which doors will open, which situations will finally change. But God often leads differently than human logic expects. Instead of revealing the entire future at once, He teaches trust one step at a time. And that process can feel frustrating when your heart is already emotionally tired. You ask, Lord, where are you leading me? Why does everything still feel unclear? Why can I not see what comes next? Yet even during those moments, God is still guiding you. Not every direction from God arrives through immediate answers. Sometimes He guides through peace, sometimes through closed doors, sometimes through delay, sometimes through quiet conviction inside your spirit that slowly becomes clearer with time. And tonight, this prayer is inviting you to stop demanding full visibility before trusting God's direction. Because if God showed you every detail about your future immediately, fear might overwhelm you before faith has time to grow. So instead, He walks with you gradually, faithfully, patiently, step by step. Psalm 37 does not say, understand your entire path. It says, commit your way to the Lord. That means trusting God enough to follow Him even while parts of the journey remain hidden from view. Lord, direct my steps. Lead me where you want me to go. Help me trust your guidance even when I cannot fully understand the road ahead. Because many people remain emotionally stuck simply because fear keeps demanding certainty before obedience. But peace often begins the moment you stop trying to control the entire journey yourself. God already sees what is ahead. He knows which opportunities will help you grow. He knows which doors must remain closed for your protection. He knows which season is preparing you for something greater than you currently understand. And even if the road feels uncertain tonight, you are not walking through it alone. God walks beside you through every unanswered question, every delay, every difficult transition, and every hidden season. But learning to follow God's direction also requires something many exhausted hearts struggle with deeply: patience while waiting for God's timing, instead of forcing their own. Finding peace while waiting on God's timing. Waiting can become emotionally exhausting when your heart desperately wants movement. You pray for change, but the situation remains the same. You ask God for direction, but clarity seems delayed. You keep hoping for breakthrough, healing, restoration, or answers. Yet time continues passing while your circumstances appear unchanged. And during long waiting seasons, frustration quietly begins growing inside the heart. Because human nature wants immediate resolution. You want the prayer answered now, the burden removed now, the breakthrough visible now. But God's timing often unfolds differently than human expectation. And this is where many people lose peace emotionally, not because God stopped working, but because waiting feels uncomfortable when you cannot fully understand why the answer has not arrived yet. You begin asking difficult questions internally. Lord, why is this taking so long? Did I do something wrong? Have you forgotten me? Will this situation ever change? And while those questions repeat inside your mind, impatience slowly turns into emotional heaviness. But tonight, God is inviting your heart into something deeper than immediate results. He is inviting you into peace while waiting. Not peace after every problem disappears, peace during the process itself. Because real spiritual maturity develops when you learn how to trust God's timing even before visible answers appear. Psalm 37 reminds tired hearts to trust in the Lord and wait patiently for Him. That kind of patience is not passive weakness, it is confident trust. It is the decision to believe that God's delays are not random, that His timing protects what your emotions cannot fully see yet. Because sometimes God delays certain things to prepare your heart. Sometimes He closes doors because something unhealthy is hidden behind them. Sometimes He slows the process because rushing ahead would create damage you do not yet recognize. And even during silence, God remains intentional. Tonight, this prayer becomes a moment where impatience begins surrendering to trust. Lord, help me remain peaceful while I wait. Teach my heart not to panic during delays. Give me patience to trust your timing even when I do not understand it fully. Because many people exhaust themselves trying to force answers before the season is ready. They rush decisions, rush relationships, rush outcomes, rush solutions, but forcing what God has not released yet often creates more pain instead of peace. And slowly, through surrender, something begins changing inside you. You stop measuring God's faithfulness by speed. You stop believing silence means abandonment. You stop allowing delays to destroy your hope. Instead, you begin trusting that even during the waiting season, God is still preparing something meaningful behind the scenes. And once trust becomes stronger than frustration, faith itself begins rising inside the heart again, even over situations that still appear impossible outwardly. Declaring faith over situations that still look impossible. There are moments in life where circumstances become so overwhelming that the situation itself begins speaking louder than faith. The problem looks too large, the delay feels too long, the answer seems too far away, and little by little, discouragement starts convincing the heart that nothing will ever change. Some people listening tonight are carrying situations that already feel impossible emotionally. Relationships that seem broken beyond repair. Prayers unanswered for years. Financial pressure that keeps growing heavier. Emotional exhaustion that no longer feels temporary. Doors that remain closed no matter how hard you try. And when life reaches those moments, fear naturally begins whispering, "There is no way forward. Nothing is changing. You are stuck. It is too late." But faith speaks differently. Faith does not deny difficulty. Faith simply refuses to believe difficulty has more authority than God. That is why Psalm 37 becomes so powerful during impossible seasons. Because it reminds you that God acts beyond human limitation, not beyond human effort alone, beyond human limitation itself. And tonight this prayer is not asking you to pretend the struggle is small. It is inviting you to stop viewing the struggle as greater than God's ability to move. Because many people unknowingly magnify their problems while shrinking their faith internally. They stare constantly at what feels impossible, at what has not changed yet, at what still hurts, at what still remains uncertain, and over time, hopelessness slowly replaces expectation. But tonight, something begins shifting. You stop declaring defeat over your future. You stop agreeing with fear. You stop believing silence means failure. Instead, you begin speaking faith over the very areas that once felt hopeless. Lord, even when I cannot see the answer yet, I believe you are still able. I trust that no situation is beyond your power. Strengthen my faith where discouragement has weakened my heart. Because impossible situations are often the exact places where God teaches deeper trust. Not trust based on visible evidence. Trust based on His character, His faithfulness, His ability to move beyond what human understanding can fully explain. And while your circumstances may still appear unchanged tonight, something powerful happens internally when faith rises again. Fear loses part of its control. Hopelessness begins weakening. Peace slowly returns, not because you suddenly understand everything, but because you stop believing the current situation is the final chapter of your story. And sometimes, when life feels most impossible, the real issue is not only the situation itself. It is the exhaustion created by carrying the struggle for too long without strength left inside yourself anymore. When your strength runs out, God's strength begins. There comes a moment where human strength reaches its limit. You try to stay positive, but your heart feels tired. You try to remain faithful, but emotionally you feel worn down by the constant pressure. You keep pushing forward because responsibilities do not stop, yet, internally, you know you are exhausted. Some people listening tonight have been strong for too long. Strong for their family. Strong for other people. Strong during battles nobody else fully understands. But carrying emotional weight for extended seasons eventually drains even the strongest hearts. And the difficult part is that many people feel guilty admitting they are tired. They think faith means never feeling weak, never struggling emotionally, never reaching moments of exhaustion. But throughout the Biblia Sagrada, God never rejected people because they felt weary. Again and again, He met exhausted hearts with compassion, strength, and renewal. Because weakness does not scare God, your emotional exhaustion does not surprise Him. He already sees the pressure you have been carrying silently. He sees the nights where anxiety kept your mind awake. He sees the battles you never fully explained to anyone. He sees how hard you have been trying to keep moving forward while feeling internally drained. And tonight, God is not asking you to pretend you are stronger than you truly feel. He is asking you to stop depending only on your own strength. Because many people reach emotional collapse simply because they keep trying to survive life without fully leaning on God's strength daily. You were never designed to carry endless pressure alone. Never designed to heal yourself completely through willpower. Never designed to sustain peace entirely through human effort. That is why surrender becomes so important. Because when your own strength begins failing, God's strength can finally become the foundation holding you together. Lord, I am tired. My heart feels heavy. I cannot carry this alone anymore. Give me strength where I feel weak. Renew the parts of me that have become emotionally exhausted. There is something deeply powerful about praying honestly. Not polished words, not pretending. Real honesty before God. Because healing often begins the moment masks fall away. And maybe tonight, instead of trying harder, God is simply asking you to rest more deeply in Him. To stop carrying life as though everything depends entirely on your own ability to remain strong. Because His strength does not disappear when yours feels depleted. His peace does not weaken when your emotions become unstable. His presence remains steady even during the moments where you feel like you have nothing left inside. And once you begin depending on God's strength instead of only your own, something remarkable starts happening internally. The pressure to control everything slowly begins loosening its grip on your heart. The freedom that comes from surrendering control. There is a kind of exhaustion that comes from trying to hold everything together for too long. You carry responsibilities, fears, expectations, unanswered questions, and emotional pressure, as though your constant effort alone can somehow prevent life from falling apart. And after a while, the heart begins feeling trapped beneath the weight of needing to control everything. Control can appear comforting at first. It makes you feel prepared. It makes you feel temporarily safer. It creates the illusion that if you think hard enough, plan carefully enough, or worry constantly enough, you can avoid pain and uncertainty completely. But eventually, control becomes a prison for the mind, because no matter how much effort you give, there will always be situations beyond your power. People you cannot change, outcomes you cannot predict, seasons you cannot rush, answers you cannot force. And when you spend years trying to manage what only God can truly oversee fully, peace slowly disappears beneath emotional pressure. That is why surrender feels so freeing. Not because problems instantly vanish, but because your soul finally stops carrying responsibilities it was never designed to hold alone. Tonight, this prayer becomes a moment of release. A moment where you stop gripping every fear so tightly. A moment where you stop demanding certainty before trusting God. A moment where you finally breathe again spiritually. Lord, I surrender control to you. I release the pressure of trying to manage everything myself. I trust you with the situations I cannot fix, predict, or fully understand. Because surrender is not giving up. It is giving over. Giving your fears to God. Giving your future to God. Giving your unanswered questions to God. Giving your emotional burdens to the one strong enough to carry them completely. And something powerful happens when surrender becomes genuine. The mind becomes quieter. The heart softens. Fear loses some of its authority. Peace slowly begins returning to places anxiety once dominated. Not because life suddenly becomes easy, but because you are no longer trying to carry life without God's help. That freedom changes people deeply. You stop living in constant emotional tension. You stop measuring every moment through fear. You stop believing your safety depends entirely on your own ability to control outcomes. Instead, you begin resting in God's faithfulness, trusting that He sees what you cannot see, that He understands what you do not understand yet, that He remains present even during uncertain seasons. And once surrender becomes real inside the heart, another beautiful truth begins rising gently through the pain and waiting. God has not forgotten a single prayer, tear, or silent cry you have carried before Him. God has not forgotten the prayer you cried in silence. Some prayers are never spoken out loud to other people. They remain hidden inside the heart. Quiet prayers whispered during sleepless nights. Silent tears nobody else notices. Moments where you sit alone carrying burdens too deep to fully explain with words. And sometimes, after waiting so long without visible answers, people begin wondering if God has forgotten them. You continue praying, continue hoping, continue trying to trust. But internally, discouragement starts asking painful questions. Did my prayer even matter? Does God still hear me? Why does heaven feel so silent? Many people listening tonight have cried private prayers they never shared with anyone else. Prayers about fear, prayers about emotional pain, prayers about family struggles, uncertainty, heartbreak, anxiety, financial pressure, loneliness, or situations that feel too overwhelming to carry alone anymore. And because the answer has not arrived yet, the enemy tries to convince your heart that God is distant. But silence is not abandonment. Waiting is not rejection. And delayed answers do not mean forgotten prayers. Throughout the Biblia Sagrada, God repeatedly responded to people during seasons where they believed heaven had gone quiet. Not always immediately, not always the way they expected, but always faithfully, because God sees every hidden tear, every exhausted thought, every prayer whispered through trembling faith, every moment where you kept trusting even while emotionally tired. Tonight, you need to hear this deeply inside your spirit. God has not forgotten you. Not your prayers, not your pain, not the burdens you have carried silently, not the nights you cried privately, not the fears you never fully explained to anyone else. He sees all of it. And even when answers take time, God remains present inside your story, working, guiding, protecting, preparing, strengthening, sometimes in ways invisible to human eyes at first. Lord, help me trust you even during silence. Remind my heart that you have not forgotten me. Give me peace while I wait for what I cannot yet fully see. Because some of the most powerful moments of faith happen when a person continues trusting God without immediate evidence. Not because the pain disappears instantly, but because hope refuses to die completely. And maybe tonight, while you are listening to this prayer, God is already restoring strength inside places that have felt empty for far too long. Maybe He is already healing areas fear tried to destroy. Maybe He is already preparing movement where you currently only see silence. Because God does not ignore surrendered hearts. And the next moment of this prayer becomes the turning point where exhausted hearts stop fearing uncertainty and begin fully trusting that God is already acting, even now. Trust Him completely. He is already acting. Tonight, after every fear, every unanswered question, every silent prayer, and every burden you have carried for so long, one truth remains standing above everything else. God is already working even now, even when you cannot see immediate movement, even when the answer has not fully appeared yet, even when life still feels uncertain. God is not absent from your situation. He has not stopped listening. He has not forgotten your prayers. And He is not confused about the direction of your life. Psalm 37 says, "Commit your way to the Lord, trust in Him, and He will act." Not maybe, not someday if you become perfect enough. He will act. That promise becomes an anchor for exhausted hearts. Because for so long, fear may have convinced you that everything depended entirely on your own strength, your own understanding, and your own ability to hold life together. But tonight, you are releasing that burden. You are no longer carrying tomorrow alone, no longer trying to force every answer, no longer allowing anxiety to dominate every thought about the future. Instead, you are placing your trust completely into God's hands. Lord, I trust You with my life. I trust You with the future I cannot see. I trust You with every burden I no longer have the strength to carry alone. Teach me to rest in Your faithfulness. Because real peace begins the moment surrender becomes deeper than fear. And maybe your circumstances have not changed yet tonight. Maybe some prayers are still unfolding. Maybe some answers are still being prepared behind the scenes. But your heart can still rest. Because God's faithfulness does not depend on immediate visibility. He remains faithful during waiting seasons, faithful during silence, faithful during uncertainty, faithful during moments where you feel emotionally weak and tired. And while you have been worrying about how everything will unfold, God has already been standing ahead of you preparing the path, protecting you from things you cannot see, opening doors in the right season, strengthening your spirit through every difficult moment, guiding you even during confusion. So tonight, breathe deeply. Release the pressure. Release the fear. Release the need to control everything yourself. God is already moving in ways you may not fully understand yet, and the same God who carried you through every previous season will remain faithful through this one too. Stay close to Him. Keep trusting Him. Keep praying. Because what feels delayed to you is never outside of God's perfect timing. And even now, while you are listening to this prayer, heaven is still working on your behalf.